soulmates. Welcome to the conversation. Plenty to chat with you about on this Wednesday. I want to welcome you to FOXSOUL's Black Report. We're following the latest warning from the DEA about a dangerous new drug and millions who could lose their Medicaid benefits due to these new policies. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. Plus, how a black community in Florida is fighting to keep their land sacred. And the black musician who's breaking world records. They're the stories that impact our people.
Our news, our views, and our voice. So let's get into our first conversation of the day as Michigan will pay $600 million to settle lawsuits over Flint's water contamination. It's the largest settlement in the state's history. Now, those funds will be allocated to those affected, including minors exposed to contaminated water, property damage claims, special education services, and business losses. The contamination occurred when the city switched its drinking water source to the Flint River, exposing up to 12,000 children to lead-contaminated water and causing a Legionnaire's disease outbreak that killed at least 12 people. The Attorney General said the settlement provides compensation for the hardship and health effects suffered by the people of Flint. Can't put a price tag on that, though, Nicordelai.
You're absolutely right. You can't put a price tag on it. And I think the fact that only 2% of these funds will go towards special education services in that county, and the remaining 8% will go to businesses that have experienced their losses. $600 million sounds like a lot of money, but considering the lingering impact of the Flint water crisis, there are plenty out there that say, may not be enough.
And it's still an ongoing battle, even if it's just mental. A lot of people still aren't trusting the water. A lot of lives still have not gotten back to normal and probably never will. You're still suffering from the ailments associated with this contaminated water. Again, you can't put a price tag on it. And just because, the Flint story isn't in the headlines doesn't mean the suffering doesn't continue, doesn't mean the efforts like with Little Miss Flint is still continuing. And that's why we have to continue to tap into stories like this and follow up so we can let the soulmates know what's really happening.
And it doesn't mean that generations of people won't be impacted by this.
That's right.
The family of Shanquella Robinson, who died mysteriously while on vacation in Mexico, is demanding justice after a letter named Dejanay Jackson as the attacker. The family's pleading with U.S. government officials to bring federal charges against those responsible for Robinson's death, as evidence was possibly transported and persons of interest communicated with each other via cell phone. An autopsy revealed that Robinson died from spinal cord injury. The case is still ongoing, and the White House advised that there isn't much they can say.
Which is why we have to, again, keep these stories in the spotlight, keep Shanquella's name, top of mind and in our mouths, and keep the family uplifted in prayer. And not only prayer, but whatever we can do to aid the process of justice. I know we've had Sue Ann Robinson on, who talked a lot about the difficulties with dealing with a whole nother country, whole nother mindset, a whole nother state of laws, if you will. But the push to get them prosecuted here in the States is ongoing. And I'm just praying for justice. In the meanwhile, we're going to have to continue to really talk about this case so it doesn't get lost in the sauce, as most cases often do.
Yeah, and to your point, it's important that we remember that Shanquella was a person. It's important that we go beyond the headlines. And, her family just celebrated what would have been Shanquella's 26th birthday. And so, it is admirable that they're able to power through that pain and demand justice.
Real serious problem here, as the DEA has warned about the rise of fentanyl mixed with xylazine in a powerful animal sedative that can cause severe wounds leading to amputations. Now, xylazine is used in combination with fentanyl to lengthen its effects, and Narcan does not reverse its effects. Now, the DEA sees xylazine, and fentanyl mixtures in 48 states, and over 23% of fentanyl powder and 7% of fentanyl pills seized contained xylazine. Now, the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels in Mexico are primarily responsible for the majority of fentanyl being trafficked here in the U.S. using chemicals sourced from China.
It's important to note this is a serious problem, and Over 100,000 Americans, have died.
Yes.
This is according to the DEA. They have died related to drug poisoning, more commonly from fentanyl poisoning. And so this is a serious issue. This isn't just, something that's impacting folks that aren't in our community. This is affecting Black folks.
Yeah. And this concoction of drugs is just so destructive, physically to your body. I've seen some of the sores and the lesions that appear, and they're calling it like the zombie drug, because you just have people who have taken it and they're just like in this state of perpetual, like it looks like a coma or sleepiness, and they're standing or they're sitting and they almost look deceased, if you will. So just a very scary looking effect to this drug.
Yeah, and in 48 of the 50 states.
Right.
And so that gives you a sense of how widespread it is. Well, Senator Rand Paul tweeted that the Manhattan District Attorney should be put in jail if former President Trump is indicted over payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Trump has criticized the district attorney's office and called for his supporters to protest. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has not commented on the claim. Senator Paul and other Trump supporters denounced the investigation as politically motivated. CNN reported that Bragg assured his office that threats against the rule of law will not be tolerated.
Listen, our guest yesterday, head of the NAACP down there in Georgia, said, look, this time around, it doesn't look like Trump's antics are going to work. People are really expecting, an indictment. I think it's been a good look for this particular DA. He's been criticized at the very top of his reign in office, if you will, which was last year. A couple of key prosecutors and employees left. He's been criticized with this soft approach on crime there in that Manhattan area. But I think this case, as it has moved along, because he's got some criticism on dragging his feet with this particular Trump situation. But I think as it's moved along, he is really finding his footing, and he's going to do what he feels needs to be done. He was just going to take his time and not allow anybody to push him into anything that was too premature. But he seems to be standing his ground this time around, and I think he's gaining some fans here.
And it's interesting to see so many Republicans really sort of circling their wagons around the district attorney. Senator Rand Paul tweeted that a Trump indictment would be a disgusting abuse of power. I think what's an abuse of power is being a sitting United States senator, and threatening, a DA, seeking to undermine an active investigation. I think that is a heinous abuse of power.
Speaking of undermining, a bomb threat was called into a lower Manhattan court on Tuesday, just before a judge was set to hear a $250 million lawsuit against former President Trump. Now, the courthouse was closed and searched, and authorities found the threat was unfounded. This civil rights lawsuit alleges that Trump, his company, and family inflated the value of their real estate assets. Trump attacked New York Attorney General Letitia James on social media following the news of the bomb threat, calling for a congressional investigation and calling the lawsuit, quote, completely bogus.
Of course he said that. Of course he's calling it completely bogus. I mean, we're just seeing just another example. Talk about abuse of power, right? This is a former president that, it seems at every twist and turn is seeking to undermine, this investigation. It is an alleged indictment. It hasn't happened yet. But this is going to be tough, I think, for the country, especially as we're heading into the 2024 election. I think you're gonna see the former president continue to politicize this very issue. Yeah,
I don't think the distractions this time around, like they worked in his presidency. I don't think the distractions and what he puts out on social media, I don't think people are falling for the banana in the tailpipe as maybe they once did, with the exception of his very close followers and supporters.
Well, a white supremacist group leader, Nicholas Welker, was arrested in San Jose, California on Tuesday for conspiring to make death threats against a Brooklyn-based journalist. His complaint alleged that Welker conspired with others to make death threats against a journalist who had reported on the extremist group. Now, according to the complaint, the Fewer Craig Division is an, quote, internationally, racially, or ethnically motivated violent extremist group that encourages attacks on racial minorities, the LGBTQ+ community, the U.S. government, journalists, and critical infrastructure. Welker could face up to 5 years in prison if convicted.
If guilty, let's hope he experienced the full extent of the law and gets what he deserves based upon, whatever he is found to be guilty of. And it just, stories like this just continue to perpetuate the fight for justice and equality. And that, we can't throw our hands up. We can't grow weary of it. There are people who are just as adamant about the opposite side of your perspective as you are about your perspective and your position. And this is proof.
Yeah, and people should be able to have differing perspectives, differing opinions, without fear for their life, right? And so for some of us that check multiple boxes, as folks that are Black, as folks that are LGBTQ, as folks that are journalists, right? We shouldn't have to live in fear that just by reporting, the facts and sharing our perspective with a larger audience, that makes our life at risk, it puts our family's life at risk, and quite frankly undermines the freedom of the press and our freedom of speech.
Speaking of journalists and the press, let's go to Mississippi, where news anchor Barbie Bassett was fired from WLBT in Jackson after making racially insensitive comments on air. Now, during a segment on Snoop Dogg's wine collection, this was back on March 8th, Bassett used the phrase "foshizzle my nizzle." Now, we all know what that means. The comment sparked backlash on social media, resulting in her termination after 20 years with the station. Now, this isn't the first time Bassett has been accused of making racist remarks and had previously issued an apology. In response to the recent incident, Bassett apologized for her comment and expressed a desire to participate in training to better understand history and people. What say ye, Nicordelai?
I think if anything, she's guilty of being tone deaf. I think, there are plenty of people out there that, sometimes, say things that they regret, and when you have the awesome responsibility of being able to sit at a news desk like this, that pressure exists to get it right. But in the past, she had, used the term grandmammy, which, to some folks in the South, they think that that's fair game. But for other people, calling anybody a mammy, that is a non-starter.
Some argued, was it within context? I mean, they were talking about Snoop Dogg. You can say whether it was or not. Maybe it just wasn't for her to say it as a white woman, especially with her having a checkered past with some of the comments that she made. It actually took the station a while to decide to let her go. She kind of sat on the bench for a while, and now they've decided to let her go. But it wasn't immediate, based upon what I understand. But it's something that folks possibly saw coming based upon her track record.
Yeah, and I just think we need to be cautious about just sort of canceling people so quickly without giving people a chance to address the injury and the harm that they've caused. And so whether you're a news anchor or you're a notable in some other way, I'm real weary of us, having that knee-jerk reaction to cancel people. But to the point that you made earlier, she has made, she's had lapses of judgment in the past, but
it was probably time to cancel.
She was nearing retirement, and so this was her way to sail right into early retirement. I'll tell you who's not retiring anytime soon. President Biden, he honored nearly 24 artists and organizations with the government's highest arts award, the National Medal of Arts, at the White House on Tuesday. Among the honorees were Gladys Knight, Bruce Springsteen, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and other musicians and writers and performers. The pair of medals marked the highest award given to artists by the United States government. The ceremony was delayed due to COVID-19, and the recipients were the 2021 winners. I've got to say, also, shout out to Dr. Janetta Cole, who received an award, and Brian Stevenson, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, a personal hero. He also got a medal.
Yeah, it's just good to see Queen Gladys. She is one of our crown jewels.
Yes.
When you talk about the upper echelon, or some of the most respected folks in the village. And it was just good to see that honor finally came back around. It's interesting to hear that, they're still playing catch up on events that were, canceled due to the pandemic, seeing as though we're about 3 years out. So hopefully they can continue to play catch up, and those who were honored or need to be honored will get on that stage and get their just due, like Miss Gladys.
And Miss Gladys was looking good. Did you see
Miss
Miss Gladys?
Fabulous in the pink.
Right?
Think pink.
Of course you noticed that.
Of course. Coming up, a ban to stop the sale of Skittles. Please.
We'll tell you where this is happening and where a push to stop selling other snacks as well might be happening. You're watching FOXSOUL's Black Report. Welcome back to FOXSOUL's Black Report. Well, health officials are bracing for chaos as states begin to determine who is eligible for Medicaid as the key pandemic policy of guaranteed eligibility ends.
So this is the first time in 3 years that many states will have to do this, leaving many without health coverage. The Biden administration is giving states a year to go through the once routine process of sorting through Medicaid rolls, though some are moving much faster.
Arkansas, for instance, will speed through the redetermination process in only 6 months, citing cost concerns and the goal of Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders to push people to, quote, escape the trap of government dependency.
Well, first and foremost, that is a huge task to go through and see, who does and who doesn't. And, I don't know if it really gets to, the root cause of, the blue and the red disagreeing on, healthcare, which has been a huge argument for years on top of years on top of years. I know a lot of people benefit from Medicaid, Medicare. It's a little gray as to what does what, and you can kind of get caught up in the system. Whatever, they are attempting to do, whatever they are attempting to define and clear up, I still think we get lost in the bureaucracy of it all. And at the end of the day, people need reliable health care to take care of themselves and their families.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that rely on Medicaid. Medicaid works. Medicaid was an essential part of the social safety net during the darkest days of the pandemic. And so, just to let people sort of fall off of a cliff in terms of support from that program doesn't seem right.
At all.
The majority of the states that are making this transition are giving people till, May or June, to sign up for other healthcare plans. But this former White House press secretary turned governor seems to have an icy cold heart.
Lady
because,
Sarah.
This idea of sparing people from government dependency.
It's interesting. All right, there's a new proposal that would ban the sale of some well-liked candies, including, these are classics, hot tamales, Skittles, and double bubble gum. Say it ain't so. Those and several other processed foods include chemicals and dyes considered dangerous for our health. They can also be found in cupcakes and some of the popular trail mixes and ice creams. The Los Angeles County author of the bill to ban these foods and candy says many companies have already voluntarily stopped using red dye number 3, titanium dioxide, and the other chemicals that are listed in these ingredients.
Now, one of the things I didn't know in this story is that a lot of these chemicals can cause significant health problems, including increased risk for cancer, damage to the immune system, and behavioral issues, right? And so we've been enjoying these candles for generations, these candies for generations. And, who knows, if that was the source of, any sort of behavioral issues, who knows? But when you know better, you do better. And because of the science, we know better. And so, at least this legislator in California is trying to do better by our kids.
Yeah, but if you're going to call it out, call it all out. I mean, when you talk about processed food and some of the crazy harmful ingredients, and not just food, let's take a look at, toothpaste and mouthwash and things of that nature, things that we don't necessarily digest, but come in close contact with our insides. So if you're going to call them out, call it all out. I don't know if that's going to make people hold up from eating Skittles and those type of candies because they're very popular, but at least to bring about the awareness so people can make, healthier choices when it comes to foods and candies like that.
Yeah, well, if you're sneezing more than usual, new research shows that it could be based on where you're living. The Weather Channel has released their list of the 10 worst cities for seasonal allergies. Coming in at number 10 is Greenville, South Carolina. Number 9, Des Moines, Iowa. Number 8, Orlando, Florida. Number 7, Cape Coral, Florida. Number 6, Sarasota, Florida. Hey, Sarasota. Number 5, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And number 4, Oklahoma City. Number 3, Scranton, Pennsylvania. And number 2, Dallas, Texas. And topping the list at number 1 is Wichita, Kansas. Now, this list is compiled from taking the average in all 3 categories: pollen counts, medicine use, and number of allergy specialists.
And it sounds like your phone wanted to help you list some,
right?
some cities too. Look, it wasn't until I moved to the DMV, and I don't know what goes on there, where it sits on the coast or something, but that's when all of these allergies all of a sudden came up. I mean, dog saliva, pet dander, the grass, the dust. I kind of suffered a little bit in the DMV, where I had to start, taking some medication. So even if your city didn't make the list, doesn't necessarily mean that, you're not dealing with some, seasonal allergies or all year round allergies. And sometimes they don't come up until your body switches up. Your body changes every 7 years, and all of a sudden you're allergic to something that you've never been allergic to. But a lot of respiratory issues in the DMV with that type of weather. And so you really have to be careful.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I've been having some, sort of chronic hoarseness in my voice, and I don't know if that may be an allergy. Still waiting to figure that piece out. But, I was never allergic to strawberries until I was 17 years old, and I suddenly became allergic to strawberries.
Really?
And now I break out in hives when I eat strawberries. And so you can become allergic to anything, anytime.
It seems very temperamental.
Yeah.
All right, there's new data that shows that millennials are no longer delaying marriage, home buying, or kids, but are piling up a mountain of debt to make this thing happen. Now, since 2019, American millennials in their 30s have seen their total debt load rise 27% to, listen to this, $3.8 trillion. As of the fourth quarter of last year. The Wall Street Journal reports that this is the largest increase of any age group measured over this time span, and marked this cohort's fastest pace of debt accumulation over any 3-year period since 2008. And they also found that millennials are missing credit card and auto loan payments at rising rates.
Well, I mean, are we surprised? Inflation is something serious, right? And so people are paying a lot more for a lot of things, and in order to afford those things, I think a lot of people are putting it on the credit card. I have family members and close friends that talk about, they howl about the cost of childcare, right? And on average, people are spending nearly, 10 grand annually just on childcare.
But I think it has more to do with, you talk about millennials, and you guys were the generation that was really born into the technology, especially the social media and so on and so forth. So I think it's keeping up with the Joneses. I think it's living beyond your means. I think it's, trying to keep up with what this IG or social media lifestyle is supposed to look like. And I just think your influences are much heavier, much stronger, and cause a lot of stress, and you're just trying to keep up.
I think that may be part of it, but that's not all of it, because
I think that's a big part of it.
But we're also the generation that was born into the financial crisis. Remember the Great Recession that happened, right? And that happened as a lot of millennials were coming out of school.
But you were also the generation.
We were also born into the generation where, student loan debt skyrocketed, the cost of going to college skyrocketed. And so the keeping up with the Joneses thing is part of it, but that's not even half the story.
But you were also the generation born into other types of monies with this whole crypto thing, the other ways of going about making money, where you didn't have to take this traditional route. For me, it wasn't if I was going to college, it was where. So there's a lot of more information and access. I just think sometimes you don't manage it too well, and I think it's just the influences. You're always looking at what somebody else has, and I think it really affects the way you go about managing your life and your money.
I think that some of us, but that may not be. It's not all of us.
I'm not going to blanket that, but what I feel is a big issue for what this story is talking about in particular is that social media thing. It's look at me, and everybody. What Chris Rock say? Everybody's the problem is attention, and how do you garner that? You put these highlights of your life, on social media that ain't even real.
Well, for some.
Okay.
For some.
Just saying.
We hear you. U.S. employers are increasingly posting salary ranges for job openings, even in states where it's not required by law, which in the long run, experts say will help black workers. Experts also attribute this transparency to a tight labor market and significant increase in remote work. Salary visibility is lowest in the southern United States, which accounted for 18 of the 20 least transparent metro areas, and highest in the western part of the country, which tends to have more regulation. Advocates say it's a trend that benefits women and people of color who statistically fare less well in hiring negotiations.
I think it's great, the transparency, but how much is it really going to help change and shift? I mean, that's been a long, drawn out debate, conversation, fight, as far as the statistics are concerned. I remember having to fight for equal pay, and not only equal pay, but equal billing. There was a radio show, and I had just as much experience as the young man that they wanted to bring on board. And I wasn't going to agree to just be his sidekick. It was going to be the Courtney Hicks and whatever show.
Yeah.
One, because I was already there and employed, and you coming to join us. Whether we got equal pay or not, I'm hoping that we did. I know I had to fight for that as well. So I appreciate this whole, hey, we're being a little bit more transparent. Is it really making a difference that women and blacks are really seeing just yet? I'm not so sure.
Well, I think you're right that this is only one part of the equation. And so transparency and pay is one part of it, but ultimately you need people in positions of power and influence and authority to act on that information, right? And so no data, no justice, but we still need people to act in order to deliver justice.
I agree. All right, so let's focus in here on our FOXSOUL headquarters right here in Detroit. There's Black Business. There's a Black Business Alliance that has been formed during the pandemic with the goal of helping level the playing field for business owners.
Yeah, now 2 new partnerships will make an even bigger difference for Black businesses in the city. Here's Fox 2's Brandon Hudson with more.
JP Morgan Chase and the Gilbert Family Foundation are investing a combined $800 grand into black businesses here in Metro Detroit. And this is not just about keeping the lights on at these small minority-owned businesses. This is about creating some generational wealth. At Cheetah's Nefertiti Bar on Detroit's west side.
The work that we're doing is about closing the racial equity gap. And we can't do that by ourselves.
We sat down with Charity Dean, president and CEO of the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance, about a big investment from 2 well-known brands in Detroit, a $600,000 commitment from the Gilbert Family Foundation, and another $200,000 from JP Morgan Chase.
What it means is that, they're joining the fight. When we first started Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance, we had a partner in Gary Torgo and Huntington Bank that said we believe in what we were trying to do in Metro Detroit.
Dean, an attorney by trade, started MDBBA during the pandemic. Think of it as a nonprofit which does the work of a chamber of commerce. A 2020 report by the Pew Research Center says only 3% of American businesses are black-owned, compared to 86% owned by whites. Black businesses are also more likely to close sooner.
Before MDBBA was formed, at least in the city of Detroit, you had the blackest city in the nation with no real advocacy. And so we started the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance to provide an opportunity for black businesses to have a voice.
2 years later, MDBBA has 800 members and has secured $9 million in capital. Its new partnership with the Gilbert Family Foundation and JP Morgan Chase will help businesses including Cheetah's Nefertiti Bar.
I'm a fan of Cheetah's. I live right down the street. Right. But really, we actually connected with Dominique, the owner of Cheetah's, during the pandemic. She needed help for her business, and so we were able to help Dominique navigate city government. We've been able to help her get funding. She's expanding. She's moving next door. So great things are happening for Cheetah's.
Charity Dean says what's next for the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance is to sit down with the city about creating an office for small businesses. On Detroit's west side, I'm Brandon Hudson, Fox 2 News.
It's our buddy Brandon Hudson. Thanks so much for that. Listen, I'm from the west side, and everybody's familiar with the mile roads here. So 6 Mile, Southfield Freeway, that's my area. And there's a meat market that I frequent, and I go up 6 Mile and I take a look at all of the abandoned buildings, and there's still the business signs up. And I know these at one point were black-owned businesses. Some are still hanging in there. Some are doing fairly well. But every time I ride down 6 Mile, I'm like, this was somebody's dream. This was somebody's vision. This was somebody's hope. This was somebody's, chance, opportunity, risk that just didn't make it. And the reason that they didn't make it is because they don't have the support, is because they don't have the access to capital, or because, maybe they lack some training or some business sense. So it's good to see organizations like this, form and pop up and begin to help out, because there are so many, we're very, we're creative folks and we want to make our mark, in our communities and in this society, but it is just so hard to do that.
Yeah, and that's the case in a lot of cities. I mean, in Los Angeles, you drive down the Slauson Avenue corridor near Crenshaw. In DC, when you drive down U Street or H Street, you see, historical Black businesses that, haven't had the access to capital
That's right.
that we need in order not just survive, but thrive. And so, again, big thanks to Brandon Hudson for that, and bring back that cotton candy blazer. That was everything.
That was good.
Still ahead, the good times are still rolling in NOLA, despite efforts to remove the mayor.
Yeah, we'll tell you all about the plot to have her kicked from office that didn't go as planned. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Fox Soul's Black Report. So let's go to Kentucky now, where residents of Louisville are pushing for the passage of a city ordinance designed to stop gentrification.
That's right. The ordinance would prioritize residents of 8 areas for municipal assistance programs and create a pathway to restore land that was wrongfully taken from families by the government.
Shamika Parrish-Wright, head of Vocal KY, believes the ordinance is necessary to halt gentrification and assist locals in transitioning from surviving to thriving. Metro Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur sponsored the proposed ordinance, which he expects to file for review soon.
I mean, this is significant, because I think a lot of folks are trying to figure out how to combat gentrification, how to keep Black communities and the character of communities intact. And so this is a very interesting proposal. The main components of the ordinance would prioritize historically Black communities for the city program and would also include home repair and down payment and small business assistance. And so, this could potentially be a model for other places across the country.
Yeah, so sticking with land and gentrification, descendants of Eatonville, Florida are fighting over the remaining 100 acres of what they consider to be sacred land near downtown Orlando and Disney. Most of the town's land has been sold to developers, and the remaining 100 acres was valued at over $20 million. This was back in 2019. Now the land is scheduled for sale on March 31st to a developer for $14 million. Eatonville was founded in 1887 by Joe Clark and was one of the first Black incorporated towns. The only recourse for the defendants on what gets built is through its zoning and planning and a possible lawsuit.
And joining us now to discuss Louisville, Eatonville, and gentrification is TJ Lofton, author of Monetizing Gentrification, Building Black Ownership. Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report.
Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to share.
Yeah, thanks for the time. So let's start off with what actually is gentrification. To be honest, for most soulmates is where these white people come from, or how do these folks get this money to rebuild this house that I've been living next door and can't get the money to do and been complaining about. So just break it down to us. What is and then what isn't, gentrification?
Well, to me, gentrification is when people see that we're doing well with ourselves, and then they decide, let's go in there and disrupt. Let's raise the taxes on the homeowners, even though they're on fixed incomes, and let's defund the schools, and let's push them out in the name of development. So let's bring in some new development in here and claim we're going to build affordable housing, which is AKA gentrification. And then you have redevelopment is when they come in there and buy buildings and update the buildings, restore the buildings. Then you have land development where they're coming in and just building brand new stuff. And that's where I see in the case of Eatonville, they have an opportunity to develop that land.
Well, when we look at stories like what's happening in Louisville and Eatonville, how do we work to take back the land? How do we build Black ownership?
Well, they should have known how to structure that. Me as a developer, as a real estate expert, I would have went in there first and said, okay, we're interested in not selling it to you, but partnering with you on the first 100 acres. And we're looking for, in the honor of the Robert Hungford, I would like to create the vocational schools there. So let's create some small business incubators. So meaning some businesses, meaning you only have one business there right now, Family Dollar. So if we created a lot of black-owned businesses. If they built those and put those in the front, then I would have okayed them putting so many houses in the back, but it would have had to been built by the local residents of Edenville.
Yeah.
That way we could have generated money.
TJ, this has been your ministry for a while. You have dedicated a lot of time and effort to this very topic here. You've crisscrossed this country over 24 states analyzing gentrification. What are some of your findings through your travels?
Well, I'm from Compton, California, and I looked at when Elon Musk moved into Compton or Hawthorne, California. Mm-hmm. You know, I had a strategy. I knew that he needed to expand. So immediately he came in, and I used to own tow truck companies, lowrider shops, paint shops, transmission shops. So I started looking at all of those businesses were being harassed by the city. So I immediately realized that must be that new Elon Musk guy who just recently sold PayPal. So we started buying the land up around his office so that he could not expand. And I told all the gentlemen who had the money to buy up all the houses so he could not expand, because I knew he needed X amount of these houses so that he could get what he needed to eminent domain the rest of the city. So eventually you saw that he left California. Mm-hmm. But that came from us. We have a structure. We have an infrastructure. Compton, California, Los Angeles, Hawthorne, that's the capital of lowriding. That's the infrastructure of custom car restorations. That's the custom car restoration capital. So they're very liquid there. The African Americans there are very liquid, that it was no problem to go back and buy the houses up, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we need in Edenville. We should have an infrastructure. We should have an infrastructure in Edenville where we're producing things, accommodating this construction, this housing market. They should be there making brand new doors, making, granite countertops, making cabinets, so that they can tap into this humongous industry of not enough homes to go around. They can supply the things that these developers need right there in Edenville and that'll fall again. That'll go back into the teaching the youth about vocational skills. Mm-hmm. TJ, but we also can big supplier. Can you hear me?
Yeah, TJ, we know that you have a connection to the late Dr. Sebi and building black ownership. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned from Dr. Sebi and about that effort?
Okay, it was Dr. Sebi. Dr. Sebi taught me, when we met, he knew that I had the infrastructure mindset of building whole complete industries. So what most people don't realize is he not only cured the AIDS, the cancer, and those diseases, he also had recipes for plant-based meals where we can replace the rice with quinoa, et cetera, et cetera. So my job with Dr. Sebi was to help him to create chain stores of plant-based pizza, plant-based tacos, just black-owned, plant-based alkaline food restaurants that we own and control. Because like I said, Dr. Sebi was a genius when it came down to the recipes. Mm-hmm. He knew exactly what vegan meant and what we needed. So that was my job to help him with.
Is there any good that has come from or can come from gentrification? I remember when former President Bill Clinton, I believe he came out of the White House and moved into a part of Harlem. It brought a lot of attention to Harlem, some good in some sense. So, as we wrap up this conversation, is there any good that gentrification can do for our communities?
Not for our community at all, not at this time. Mm-hmm. If it can become a great situation, if we become developers, land developers, and we start learning the trades, it'll be a great situation. Then we could all develop and we starting businesses, it'll be great. But the problem is the schools are not interested in teaching entrepreneurship, nor the trades or vocational classes.
Mm-hmm. Is it even possible to stop gentrification? Is that even possible?
Yes, absolutely. We should not be allowing, if I would have known early enough, I would have voted Tesla out. I would have never let Elon Musk come into Hawthorne, California, because we can prove that he has no African-American employees, but maybe 2 or 3. So if he's not going to hire us, why would we want him here? And it goes for all the rest of the Googles, the Facebooks. All we have to do is say, no, we don't want them here unless they do a 70% local African-American hire. Not a minority hire, but an African-American hire. Other than that, if we stop the corporations from coming, then the developers will stop coming as well.
Wow. Well, stay on fire, TJ Lofton. We appreciate your time and your efforts and that good trouble that you've been getting yourself in. And you're now an official soulmate. We got to have you back to discuss this a lot more as the effort continues to just really bring about awareness. We appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you for the great work you're doing by even talking about it. That's major.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Likewise.
Well, the effort to recall New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell has failed following an official count of petition signatures released by the Louisiana governor's office on Tuesday. Although the petition sheets contained over 67,000 signatures, most were declared invalid by the registrar. Governor John Bel Edwards announced that only 27,243 of the signatures were valid, falling about 18,000 short of what was needed to force a referendum.
I don't know how concerned my sister was. I don't. You know, she's very active on social media, you know, out and about with Mardi Gras, dancing, you know, and despite some of the backlash she got via those floats that, you know, made fun of her administration and her mayoralship. But listen, you know, there was some kind of quiet confidence there where she knew she was not going to be, you know, taken out. And it has been proven in this latest development here, and it looks like she's here to stay, at least for now. Whether you agree with her being in office or not, a lot of people who are for her say, look, she hasn't been involved in anything more than any other mayor. You know, could it be because she is a black female where she's been unfairly targeted? You know, New Orleans politics is messy, and so, you know, add mayor and stir. Well, so she still has a lot of supporters.
And politics in a lot of places is very messy. And, you know, the fact that, you know, we can't ignore the fact that these recalls are tactics being used by some folks to muck things up and prevent progress from happening. We've seen it on the state and local level in a number of different states. And so, you know, Mayor Cantrell is just the latest sitting elected official to fight back against this tactic.
All right, it's time to celebrate. And today we celebrate Black history with a twist of Black girl magic in honor of Women's Her Story Month.
That's right. A 2018 Florida A&M University graduate just became the first Black woman to ever become a neurosurgeon resident at Vanderbilt University. Tamia Potter is currently going viral on social media from her recent tweet of the news.
I mean, she is just all over the place. We talked about this morning in our meeting. She tweeted, "My first job was a certified nursing assistant at 17 years old in 2014. Today, on March 17th, 2023, I was blessed to be selected as the first African-American female neurosurgery resident to train at Vanderbilt University Medical Center for neurosurgery." We want to say and give a big congratulations to Tamia Potter. And let me tell you, first and foremost, Vanderbilt is no joke, honey. That's right. Like the Ivy League of that little area. And then to be studying what she studied and just everything you had to dedicate just to get to this point. Right. And now the real work begins, and nothing but the best for her.
That's right. That's right. And 'tis the season. There are so many stories on social media right now of medical students matching, right? You know, they are matching with whatever medical institution they're going to continue to hone their skills at. And so congratulations to her and so many out there. We know there's a shortage of Black nurses and doctors, and so she's doing the work to address that. Up next, The Weeknd. First, he was the most streamed artist, and now he's breaking world records.
Yeah, we'll tell you about the Guinness World Record he has set for the first time ever. There he is. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Fox Soul's Black Report. Well, Cardi B's $4 million defamation verdict against gossip blogger Tasha K is being upheld by an appeals court. The verdict against Tasha K came after the blogger made salacious claims on YouTube about drug use, STDs, and prostitution. The appeals court ruled that Tasha K, whose real name is Latasha Kibi, had failed to properly make that argument to the trial judge, meaning that she forfeited the right to do so before an appeals court. The judge ruled that Tasha would need to either immediately pay Cardi B or secure a bond covering the entire amount while she appeals. It's unclear if she ever did either.
And 3 men have been found guilty in the 2018 murder of rapper XXXTentacion. X, whose real name is Jassy Onfro, was attacked and gunned down outside a motorcycle shop in Florida. Michael Boatwright, Travion Newsom, and Dedrick Williams will be sentenced April 6th. A fourth man pleaded guilty to second-degree murder charges in that case and testified against the other defendants.
What is happening in Florida?
It's a lot going on in Florida lately, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this happened a while back. And so, you know, these murder trials take a while. And obviously now we have what we have as far as the result. But lots popping off in Florida. A lot of, you know, hip hop. That area has a big flourishing hip hop scene. And sometimes we know that, unfortunately, you know, with that culture comes messiness, and that's what you have
and
here.
sometimes when you got a messy governor to match, you know, I don't know, I'm just saying.
Well, there it is.
Jay Morant, the all-star point guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, has rejoined the team after serving an 8-game suspension and is expected to play in tonight's game against the Houston Rockets. The team held Morant out of Monday's game to allow him time to ramp up his conditioning after spending 2 weeks away from the team, during which he attended a Florida counseling facility. Morant was suspended for 8 games for conduct detrimental to the league after live streaming a video of himself holding a firearm while appearing to be intoxicated. He addressed his teammates and coaching staff on Monday, but details were not disclosed.
And keeping with basketball for just a moment, legend Irvin Magic Johnson, the homie, the fellow Spartan, joins investment group in a bid for the Washington Commanders NFL team led by investor Josh Harris. Now, the group is competing with others to purchase an ownership stake in the team, which was listed with a value of $5.6 billion after owners Dan and Tanya Snyder announced their intention to sell last November. Johnson, who was already part owner of the LA Dodgers, previously teamed up with Harris on a failed bid to buy the Denver Broncos. It remains unclear how much Johnson is willing to contribute to the purchase. But whatever he's willing to contribute, if he's a part of this purchase, herein lies some progress and maybe NFL ownership. Can't deny that.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. I just love that there are so many conversations around ownership. There's so much happening in that space. And this ain't a little bit of money. This is big money.
Yeah.
This is big money. And, you know, Magic Johnson, you know, has been just sort of, you know, an exemplary example of what it means to, you know, make money, but also do good by your community.
Yeah, and going back to the story prior to All Eyes on Ja tonight, we hope the best. We hope the training and the counseling has worked and will continue to work, and he will continue to flourish on that court. He's one of the best right now to do it.
That's right.
All right. The Weeknd is having a great 2023 so far. The Canadian artist has broken 2 Guinness World Records and is set to start in an upcoming HBO drama series. Guinness World Records announced that The Weeknd is now the world's most popular artist. The Earned It singer currently has 111.4 million monthly listeners on Spotify, breaking the previous record of 100 million monthly listeners, and has surpassed Ed Sheeran's 77.5 million monthly listeners. Now, The Weeknd's boost in streams is partially credited to his Die For You remix featuring Ariana Grande that went viral on TikTok. I'm just glad he cut his hair, because I was not understanding that. I felt like it wasn't as clean as it needed. How do you get up in there? So I'm just glad he kind of flipped the look a little bit.
Let me tell you,
he's a handsome guy.
You know, I've heard The Weeknd perform at Coachella. You know, he has a great voice. Even his studio projects don't always do him justice. But just because you got all those streams don't mean you got the same notoriety as some of the legends.
I was going to say, because when you think of big stream numbers, The Weeknd just doesn't come to mind. So this kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah.
But good for him. Still ahead, it's our favorite. You already know it is Black Excellence time.
That's right. We'll introduce you to the family that's buying the block and keeping gentrifiers far away. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report. We'll be right back.
And we are back. You see it. You see it right now on Fox Soul's Black Report. It is time for Black Excellence. All right, we want to introduce you to Dr. Tarcia and Derek Hubert from Lott, Texas, who purchased an entire block of abandoned commercial property to feature Black-owned businesses in the community after spending years highlighting Black-owned businesses through their YouTube channel.
That's right. The couple says that the goal is for people to come visit and patronize these Black businesses, along with developing nearby residential areas. Construction is in process for a wing restaurant, a coffee shop, and other restaurants, as the plan is to have the block up and running just in time for the summer.
Additionally, the Huberts wants the location to be an option for people looking towards retirement. So there's that residential component there. So congratulations to them. For today's stories and more, access Fox Soul's video on demand on any of our streaming partners like Samsung Plus, YouTube, Roku. You can check out past shows and other Fox Soul content when you visit foxsoul.tv. And don't forget, Soulmates, when you download that Fox Soul app, it is absolutely free and you can be with us all day, every day, because we would want to do the same with you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And it's all free. It's all free. So they ain't got to worry about that. But you know, the cost of gentrification, you know, it is.
Well, I feel like that's the flip side. So we talked to JT about, you know, some of the negative aspects, but you know, that story that we just tapped into, I think that's a positive of it's Black on Black gentrification, which is a good thing. Yeah. I
mean, I really like what they're doing in Eatonville. I'm sorry, in Louisville, what they're experimenting with in terms of what happens if you make it sort of a historical district and you provide folks with down payment assistance. Give people the tools to be able to stay in their neighborhoods after there is redevelopment. And
we also need to be a part of the process. If you're going to build and upgrade, we need to be a part of the process. We need to be the builders. We need to be the contractors and so on and so forth. I think that's what the interviewer was saying earlier as well.
And I think that city council member in Louisville understands that. And so we'll continue to keep our eye on that and more. Thanks to all of you for joining us. I'm Nicordelai Corte.
And I'm Courtney Hicks.
Until next time, Soulmates, stay lifted.